I still remember the day he left. I was just a kid, barely 11, sitting at the top of the stairs, knees pulled to my chest, listening through the cracks in the wooden railing while my parents argued downstairs. I didn't understand everything they said, but I knew enough. Something about failure, something about starting over. And then the door slammed. He never came back. For the longest time, I told myself I didn't care. I told people he was dead. Sometimes that was easier than explaining. He simply chose to disappear. He never called on my birthdays, never showed up at graduations. My mother tried her best, but I could see it wore her down, not just the burden of raising me alone, but the silence he left behind. 15 years later, I opened my first cafe on the corner of Grove and 7th in Brooklyn. It was a dream I'd carried since college, a space where people could slow down, read a book, escape the cold. I called it Anchor. It felt right, something solid, something I never had growing up. Business started slow, but it was honest. I built every table with my own hands, brewed every cup with attention. Locals came back that I learned names, listened to stories. For the first time in years, I felt grounded. Then, about 8 months in, the whispers started. Have you seen the new cafe opening down the block? Looks fancy. Real corporate vibe. Coffee smells incredible, though. I didn't think much of it. Competition was part of the game. But when I walked past that new place one early morning, something made me stop. The sign above the door read, Red Oak Cafe. And standing behind the counter, adjusting an espresso machine, was a man I hadn't seen in over a decade. My father. He looked older, of course, grayer, the lines on his face deeper, like he'd lived a dozen lives since the one we shared. He moved with confidence, ease. He didn't look like a man haunted by choices. I stood outside, frozen that he didn't see me. And in that moment, the entire weight of my childhood came crashing down. The birthdays he missed, the nights I cried silently, wondering what I had done wrong. The way I taught myself to forget. He was just there like some ghost who decided to come back and open a cafe, right next to mine. What were the odds? Part of me wanted to storm in, yell, ask him why. Why now? Why here? But another part of me, the part that learned to survive without him, told me to stay silent, to watch. So I did. He didn't recognize me, not even when I walked by again the next day. Not when I stood in line for a coffee a week later, pretending to look at my phone. He smiled at me like I was any other stranger. Maybe I had changed, maybe he never cared enough to remember. But I remembered everything, and I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. Red Oak Cafe opened its doors with a grand event, free pastries, live acoustic music, even a local influencer making reels by the window. Within a week, half my regulars were stopping by there, just to try it out. A few of them didn't come back. I watched it unfold like a slow-motion car crash. Every morning, I'd step outside Anchor with a steaming cup of my house blend and watch their foot traffic. They had digital menus, minimalist furniture, latte art with hearts and swans. It was flashy, trendy, exactly what I'd worked not to be. And at the center of it all, my father. Charming, confident, magnetic in a way I had almost forgotten. He talked to customers like old friends. People loved him. The worst part, he was good. The coffee was damn good that I know. I bought one every couple of days just to taste the enemy. And every time, I left with a knot in my stomach. Because the man who'd walked out on us without a word, he was thriving. He still didn't recognize me. One Friday night, I stayed late, cleaning up after a long, slow day. My barista, Lena, leaned over the counter and said, "Hey, you okay? You've been off lately." I looked at her, thought about telling her the truth. That the guy stealing our customers was the same guy who'd abandoned me and my mom like we were yesterday's trash. But I just said, "Yeah, just tired." What was I supposed to say? "Hey Lena, fun fact, the owner of the cafe down the street is my estranged father, and I'm not sure whether I want to destroy him or make him look me in the eye and apologize." Not exactly small talk material, but the resentment was growing. Every time someone compared Anchor to Red Oak, every time I heard how professional their service was, how warm the owner seemed, it twisted something inside me. One morning, I caught a glimpse of him standing in the back alley, taking a phone call. He was laughing, full, belly-deep laughter. That sound used to echo in our house. I hadn't heard it since I was a boy. I couldn't take it anymore. I walked up to him. For a moment, he turned toward me, eyes meeting mine. And nothing, just a polite nod, like I was any other guy on the street. Not his son, not a ghost from his past. That night, I stared at myself in the mirror. Do I really look that different? That forgettable? I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by bills and to-do lists. He had everything. A booming business, a team, a following. And I had anger, and silence, and questions that hadn't stopped screaming in my head for 15 years. But maybe I didn't need him to recognize me. Maybe what I needed was to beat him, outbrew him, outlast him. Make Anchor everything his café could never be. I stood up. If he wanted a war, I'd give him one. There's a saying in business, don't take things personally. Too late for that. Red Oak was chipping away at my customer base, and I was done sitting back and watching it happen. If he wanted to play the game, I'd play. And I'd play better. First, I revamped Anchor's menu, added a seasonal drinks board, some gluten-free and vegan options, and hired a local pastry chef who made these killer lemon cardamom scones that people couldn't get enough of. I started running weekly trivia nights, free Wi-Fi for students, and a loyalty program. But I didn't stop there. I began studying their hours, their customer flow, their staff. I noticed that Red Oak had a lull between 2 and 4 p.m., so I launched afternoon anchors, half-price drinks during their slump. Foot traffic picked up. I even saw a few familiar faces return, awkwardly saying things like, honestly, this just feels more real. I smiled, but it wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was something darker, something sharper. I became obsessed that I couldn't sleep unless I had a new idea to beat them. I started waking up at 4 a.m. to test roast profiles, redesigned our signage, and paid a photographer to shoot cinematic coffee content for Instagram. One night, I passed by Red Oak and saw my father wiping down tables alone. Through the window, I could see him pause, lean his hands on the counter, and stare out into the dark. He looked tired. A flicker of guilt hit me, but I shook it off. Where was his guilt when he left me and Mom? When we got evicted from our first apartment because she couldn't pay rent without his help? No, he earned this. Still, part of me wondered, does he ever think about us? Does he know what he's doing to me, opening a shop 1 block away? The universe couldn't be that cruel. This had to be deliberate, right? A week later, he walked into Anchor for the first time. I was behind the counter, hands deep in a sink of soapy dishes. The bell above the door rang, and I glanced up, heart instantly in my throat. He looked around, calm and casual, like he was checking out the competition. Nice spot, he said. His voice. God, I hadn't heard that voice in years. It was deeper, rougher, but unmistakable. I nodded, tried to act like my hands weren't shaking under the phone. Thanks, I said flatly. He smiled. You the owner? I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. He looked around again. Good vibe. What's your name? I froze. I could have said it. I could have looked him dead in the eye and said Jason Myers, the son you left. But I didn't. Jay, I said. Just Jay. He reached out his hand. Nice to meet you, Jay. I'm Robert. Like I didn't know, like he hadn't been my entire damn origin story. We shook hands. His grip was firm, mine trembling. As he walked out, he gave a friendly wave. I'll be seeing you around. I stood there long after the door closed, heart pounding in my chest. He'd been 5 feet away, and still he didn't see me. Not really. Maybe he never would. After that day, something in me shifted. He had stood right in front of me, called me Jay, smiled, complimented my cafe like we were complete strangers. And somehow, that felt worse than if he'd ignored me altogether. Was I that forgettable, that easy to erase? I kept telling myself that this was just business, a rivalry, not a resurrection. But the truth was, I had never buried him properly. He was a phantom in my life, a name, a wound. Now, he had a face again, a presence, a damn storefront across the street. That night, I dreamt of him, not the man he is now, but the man I used to know. He was in our old living room, sitting on the floor with me, teaching me how to play chess. Control the center, he'd said. Always know what your opponent wants, even before they do. I woke up in a cold sweat. I started making mistakes. Small things at first, burning milk, forgetting orders, snapping at Lena. She pulled me aside after closing one night. Jason, she said quietly, something's not right with you lately. Talk to me, please. The way she said my full name, Jason, made me flinch. I had gotten so used to hiding under the fake J, even from myself. I looked at her and almost told her everything. But instead, I just said, I've got a lot on my mind. She gave me a long look. Then maybe you need to deal with it before it deals with you. I stayed late after she left, sat alone with the lights dimmed, sipping cold coffee, staring at the front door like I expected someone to walk through it. But no one did. That weekend, Red Oak hosted a neighborhood event, free drinks for kids, storytelling, live music. People lined up down the block. I watched from my window as my father high-fived a kid in a Spider-Man hoodie, laughed with a group of moms, hugged an elderly man in a wheelchair. He looked good, happy, like someone who belonged. It twisted something inside me. Rage, yes, but something else too. Something uglier. Envy. Not just because he had customers, but because he had peace. And I was still choking on ashes. I went home that night and opened a dusty box I hadn't touched in over a decade. Inside, old birthday cards, school awards, and one photo of the three of us, me, Mom, and him, at Coney Island. I was maybe 6 that I looked happy, like I belonged to someone. I stared at his face in the picture, smiling, arms around us like nothing could break us. Then I flipped it over. In my mother's handwriting, summer before everything changed. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I wanted to feel in control again. But the next day, I walked into Red Oak just before closing. He was cleaning up behind the counter. He looked up, smiled politely. "Jay, right?" I nodded. "Coffee?" "On the house," he said. "No," I replied. I had a question." He raised an eyebrow. I cleared my throat. "Why here? Why this neighborhood?" He looked puzzled, like it was the most innocent question in the world. "My wife grew up a few blocks away," he said casually. "She passed a couple years ago. We used to talk about opening something here. After she was gone, I figured, why not? Fresh start. Something good." His wife. He had a whole new life, a new love, a new story. And we weren't in it. "I'm sorry for your loss," I managed to say. He nodded. "Thanks. She was everything to me." I clenched my fists. He hadn't said those words about my mother. The woman he left, the woman who cried herself to sleep for years. He looked at me again. "You ever lose someone?" I opened my mouth, closed it, and simply said, "Yeah." The air in Red Oak felt heavier that evening. I could see the soft glow of the pendant lights casting shadows on his tired face. The man behind the counter wasn't just my father. He was a stranger with a story I didn't fully understand yet. "Jay," he said softly, "you don't have to keep this up. You know, the competition, the silence between us." I swallowed hard. The walls I'd built around myself, around him, began to tremble. "How long?" I blurted out. "How long did you plan this? Opening right here where I built my life." He blinked, surprised by the anger in my voice. "It wasn't planned," he said. "I didn't even know you were here until a few weeks ago. Believe me." I scoffed, bitterness bubbling up. "Yeah, right. Because a new café just happens to open 1 block away with the exact vibe I'm trying to create." He looked away, and for a moment I saw the man I remembered, vulnerable, lost. "Jay, I made a lot of mistakes. Leaving you and your mom was the biggest one. I thought I was doing the right thing at the time. I was scared. I didn't know how to be a father. But I never stopped thinking about you." I laughed bitterly. "Thinking about me? You disappeared without a word. You didn't even say goodbye." He nodded slowly. "I know, and I'm sorry. I can't undo the past, but I want to try to make it right. If you'll let me." My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw something, to run away forever. But another part, the part that never stopped hoping, whispered to listen. "I'm not sure I'm ready," I admitted. "I'm not sure I can trust you." He reached out, hesitating, then withdrew his hand. "I get it. I'll be here when you're ready. No pressure." We stood in silence, the hum of the cafe around us, strangers again, but maybe not for long. As I walked out, I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Maybe this war didn't have to end with destruction. Maybe there was room for something new, for forgiveness, for family. But only time would tell. Weeks passed since that night at Red Oak. I found myself standing at a crossroads between anger and acceptance, between rivalry and reconciliation. I kept pouring my heart into Anchor. New ideas, new faces, new moments that reminded me why I started this journey in the first place. But something had changed inside me. The war I thought I wanted felt hollow now. What was the point of beating him if it meant losing myself? One afternoon, I received a text from Robert, just 2 words, "Coffee, together." I hesitated. My mind raced through every possible scenario. But then I realized maybe this was the moment I'd been waiting for. We met at Anchor, the place I built from the ground up. The same tables I'd hammered and polished, now witnesses to a fragile truce. He looked older, softer, and more the confident competitor, but a man seeking a second chance. We talked not about business, not about the past mistakes, but about my mother, his wife, our losses and hopes. About what it meant to be a family, even after broken promises. I told him about the struggles, the loneliness, the nights I cried without him. And he shared the guilt, the regrets, the fear that kept him away. It wasn't easy, forgiveness never is. But as the afternoon sun dipped low, something settled between us. I realized that family isn't just blood or business. It's trust, patience, and sometimes the courage to start over. We agreed on one thing: we'd coexist. Not as enemies, but as imperfect men trying to make peace with their past. Walking home that evening, I felt lighter than I had in years. Anchor wasn't just a cafe anymore. It was my home.my anchor in the storm. And maybe, just maybe, it could be the same for him too.